So who are the best Corrin units? In this video, I'm going to be ranking units based on how good they are at using Corrin as a resource. So we have the Sorin S rank, the Arcus A rank, the Borkus B rank, the Corrin C rank, and the Dorcas D rank. So I'm going to be looking at things like how well the unit can leverage the stat increases, how well the unit can leverage the passives, how well it can leverage the emblem in general. All right, so to begin, we have Alchrist. So Alchrist is usually used on his main class, the sniping class, Tier d'Elite, or whatever it's called. So he does have 3 range. So one of the things I'm looking for is, can the unit 3 range? And this is relevant because if you 3 range with Corrin, you can snap freeze in a plus shape at 3 range safely, so you can disable groups of enemies safely. So just because he can do that, I'll put him in B tier. He can consistently hit with a longbow, debuff, and the 3 range. And those are, like, you always debuff because you have Corrin, but this would be like the use case, right? Now, he doesn't leverage the magic stat increase the best. He can kind of get a damage boost to like a radiant bow, so that can kind of help him radiant bow. But he can 3 range poke and also create avoid tiles for your team on his base class. That's pretty decent. Now, in other classes, he obviously can create different tiles, but arguably his best class is his main class, so that's what I'm assuming he's being run on. All right, Alir. I would say Alir is S tier on this. So Alir can run pretty much anything on this, but Alir could be on dragon type and create anything as needed, and also benefits from like the health increase for off tanking. But being able to create every single tile type, getting fire when you need it, ice when you need it, defense tiles, anti-breaking, and so on, can be pretty decent. You also get range +1 on the dragon type class with torrential, so you can freeze a longer line of foes and also hit more enemies and hit different patterns. So if you have 2 enemies that are 2 spaces apart, you can hit them on dragon type, whereas you couldn't hit them with torrential on the normal 3 range, so anything else. Essentially what this lets you do is freeze 2 distant enemies and then all the adjacent enemies to those enemies. So this has some like strategic value, and you also reduce the engage step by 1, allowing you to build up Corrin faster by running Divine Dragon. So it has some huge advantages, and you could run something like Brave Sword, Speed Plus, or Speed Taker, and go for like quadding, so you can rapidly refill your engage meter. Alfred's kind of not the best unit here. His best class is probably Wolf Knight, and that's a 1 to 2 range, which is good, but he wants speed fixing so that he can be a relevant combat unit. He's not going to be good on classes that can 3 range. You could throw him on Warrior, but there's better Warriors, so he's not the best use case. And also, Warrior isn't the best class for this emblem anyways. You can snap freeze at 3 range, but most Warriors have kind of low dex and therefore low accuracy, and he is no exception here. Now, you can hit fix with engravings, but he's not going to be one of the best users of this. Amber, he could be on like a Warrior and go for 3 range. He does get hit increase as long as he and the target aren't adjacent to any allies or foes. So he could reliably poke single targets with longbow and debuff them. But when he goes for AoE freezing, it's not going to be the best. His strength is high, so when he goes for attacks, he could also run like a Brave Axe or some kind of, Tomahawk or whatever. So he could have like Tomahawk, Killer Axe, or Brave Axe, or some kind of main axe, and then he could also have a longbow, so he can snap freeze as needed. He has decent bulk, not like the best, but he can tank a hit. Not like a ton of hits, like maybe 1 or 2 hits. The extra health helps. The magic and res increase, really of those two, the res helps him tank magic a little bit better. But he could 3 range poke and it would be okay. And on backup, you get the stone tiles, which is decent. Anna on Corrin, I would say this is like A tier. She actually can leverage the bulk. She can leverage all the stats. She can get, she can fight other mages better. She can get more magic for her on attacks. You could run her on Griffin Knight or Mage Knight. Now, of the 2 of those, Griffin Knight has less crowd control because you just get a healing tile thing that just doesn't impede movement but heals allies for chip heal, like allies that are on the ground. And the Mage Knight would get the water tiles, which actually can impede movements, and they also decrease avoid, so they're good at setting up kills on fast enemies. So if you need to hit, Wolf Knights, Sword Masters, things that are fast that are on the ground, you can do that. Obviously, you can always debuff them by attacking them too on Corrin. But Anna's pretty fast, so she just needs like speed +5, throw her on Mage Knight, and she should be doubling semi-consistently, or at least not, if not at least consistently. So she'd be a decent unit on this. It gives her Magic Plus. She's basically a magical unit, so it plays into her strengths. Boucheron, he can't really leverage much of this kit at all. He needs strength, he needs damage and speed fixing to be relevant. He doesn't have like high strength value or high accuracy, so he doesn't have like an advantage for like, basically if it's a physical unit, you want it to be like longbow poking or doubling and killing something at 1 or 2 range, while also freezing things to shut things down while simultaneously killing them. And a lot of these physical builds need a lot of speed fixing or damage fixing, and Corrin does not do either of that for them. So if you're on a mage, you get magic, so then you just need to speed fix. But if you're on a physical, you're going to need to have high might, like high strength, and he just doesn't have that. Bune, I would say, is similar in terms of Corrin performance. He just doesn't bring anything to the table that leverages her kit well. Saline, I actually think, is pretty good on Corrin. She wants to be on Mystical anyways, and she has pretty good utility. You can get her Canter early, so she doesn't go for doubling. You just hand her Thoron, you get her Canter, and then she debuffs, she quality times. Her passive lets other allies use vulneraries to heal for 22 instead of 15, and 45 instead of 30 on elixirs. So she boosts healing item effectiveness, she can spam fire, and she can debuff. Now, of the Corrin units, she isn't the best, but she is a pretty solid one that's pretty low effort, that you don't really need to do much to get her online. Just get her Canter and call it a day. Hand her a hit engraved Thoron and she'll put in work for you. Same thing with Citrine. I would say Citrine, I'll put her a little bit below Saline because Saline has more utility, but Citrine has more damage by like a few points. So you could get them both like momentum Canter Thoron and run them on Corrin, and they would both pop off. She has more utility, she has more damage, and she's a little bit more durable. But I would say they're very close. I would favor her over her. She just has like the vulnerary healing is very useful early to mid game, and even late game it can help like patch things up. In addition to quality time, Chloe would be good as a like 11 sword or mage knight. I'm sorry, 11 sword, mage knight, or griffin knight with Corrin. She's very fast on griffin, and if she gets a damage increase from Corrin, she would be able to one-run things while freezing in a plus shape and then off tank. The extra health would help her off tank, so she could be like an avoid tank Corrin build, and that would be pretty good. Probably even better than a Lear. Better as a combat unit, worse as utility. So keep in mind Corrin's a utility shutdown. So clan on Corrin. Now if you run him on Mage Knight, he could be okay. I'll put him in high B tier. If you run him on physical, about the same. He's a little bit of like project, kind of similar to Anna. But I think her result is better than his on average. He also has low bulk, so I don't think he's that good of a unit overall. I know some people love him, but he's whatever. Diamant on Corrin, I'll put him in C tier. He has bad dex. He does a better strength than these. He has decent speed, but he would need hit fixing. He could use longbow on warrior and be like a slightly weaker Amber, but they have like similar dex, and Amber just has more strength, so he could go for doubling, but like I said, Corrin does not damage or speed fix a unit unless it's a magical unit. So physical units are going to be worse as combat units, and they're basically going to be going for like longbow snapshots, like snap freezes and things like this. Let's see, Etier. Honestly, I think she would be a bad Corrin unit. Now she can run longbow, but her accuracy is bad. So like the only advantage she has is like, the thing is she's Amber, but you have to level her up a ton early game, and she has worse stats than him at the same level. So like she's literally just worse than Amber, and you have to feed her early game XP. So this is why I always rank her low, because she's a high investment that has like a low performance, but she would not do anything that these couldn't do better. These have like similar dex to her, but she has terrible bulk. Now terrible bulk doesn't matter if you're like Canter poking, but her dex is low, so she's gonna need like a hit fixed longbow, and even then Thoron has higher might than longbow, so why bother? She's not gonna be doubling with the longbow, so it's kind of a waste. Honestly, it's not really that way. Like the Thorons are just better because you also get a staff bot, which if you heal, you get a bar back. Like you get an emblem bar per heal. So like as these staff bots are like healing and stuff, they're building up Corrin again. Whereas like with this, she could be attacking to build it up, but her damage is going to be inconsistent and relatively like low impact, like a lot of these will be, because you don't get damage fixing or speed fixing, so it's just debatable. Fugato, he would be good on Corrin. He's already on a class that can leverage Radiant Bow. He can double consistently. He has good build and build growth. He has pretty good bulk, so getting more health means he could tank like maybe another enemy. So this is actually pretty relevant for him. I would say he's a little bit better than Anna. Fram on Corrin. If you were to switch Fram into like Mage Knight, I do think she is a pretty good Mage Knight, so she's very fast also, so she could pull it off. She's basically Anna with less magic, and I think similar speed and dex, but she's easier to get it going than Anna because she can just staff bot herself, you know, from the beginning of the game to level 10, second seal into Mage Knight or Griffin Knight, and then throw her on Corrin, call it a day. Now you could try to throw her on like Sage or something, but Mage Knight can use Thoron, so if you want her to be a Thoron unit, she'd be decent at it. But you know, all of these mages can use Thoron, and he could still use Longbow, but mostly use Radiant Bow. And then maybe give him some Spirit Dusts, get him the magic plus I think like 4 from Max Corrin, and then he could be dealing decent damage on Radiant Bow with doubling. Goldmary is a Corrin unit. She has good bulk, so she's like an off tank. Getting more health does help her. I would say she's like high B tier. She doesn't leverage magic damage at all, but the health helps her, the res helps her, and the debuff, you know, it's player phase only, so like tanks are usually enemy phase builds, but she would be durable enough to like trade damage, debuff things, and then hold the position, and the extra health and res do help her survive, so that could be relevant. Hortensia I think is S tier, Ivy I think is S tier. I think they're better than these, potentially. Alright, so why are these S tier? So Hortensia gets magic damage increase, she gets extra health, she's very fast. Usually if she dies, it's because something does like an excess of 3 to 4 damage to kill her. So if she just has like 10 more health, she can tank a hit. So this lets her be more aggressive, this lets you position her in more dangerous situations as long as only one thing can hit her and it's not like an archer or something. So this basically complements her low magic and her low durability, and leverages her high speed and high utility and gives her more speed and or gives her more damage and gives her more utility. So it basically complements her place or her kit. And then for Ivy, it gives her more health for off tanking, it gives her more magic for damage, and then all she needs is speed fix and she's good to go. And I personally just ran this build and it was really cracked. She was able to approach a group of like 5 enemies, freeze 3 of them, enemy phase the other 2, and then, you know, catch a heal from Hortensia, who was just hanging around, you know, off on flyer only tiles or wherever in a safe position, and then do it again. So these, like either of these as Corrin units are really good. You can also make Hortensia a Sage so that she can Thoron and Bolg, and with the extra damage, she usually 1 rounds, and she does have good speed, so she just needs a little bit more speed fixing to double with Bolg. But yeah, they're both pretty good on this. They're really good on this. Kagetsu on Corrin, he has good speed, he has a good dex. He would be a good physical Corrin. Now he doesn't have staff botting, and both of these I'm assuming you're running them on Mage Knight, but he doesn't have staffs, but he does have, you know, good accuracy, good damage, with like good strength, so he could reliably be a warrior that, like, you know, doubles on the longbow and actually puts in meaningful damage, unlike a lot of the ones that hit with single hit. So he could get, you know, some kind of damage fixing thing, maybe like Gentility plus to get bravery for +5 damage, and then speed +5, so that way he can double. But he would reliably double on longbow. He has the build for it, he could put in the work, he could easily kill as well as debuff, so he could like kill something while freezing, you know, other things. And of course he's a good combat unit with good bulk, and he's generally considered an S tier unit, or at least an A tier unit, so he would be really good. Lapis, she's not very magical. I'm gonna put her in low B tier. She's fast, so she could potentially double on longbow. She could go for a magical class. I think she does have some magic growth. It's not the best though. I can't remember off the top of my head. Let me just look up growth rates. Whoa, there's my controller. There goes my controller. I'm leaving it in too. All right, growth rates, Lapis. She does have 20% magic growth, so she could be on a magical class. All right, I'll put her like high A. So You have to, you actually, no, maybe second seal her, get her on Mage Knight. She's fast. She has 5% build growth, 55% speed. She could be a decent Mage Knight. She's generally worse than Chloe, who has better bulk and can off-tank better. So, like, if you're running a Mage Knight Corrin, it's generally going to be getting hit, or at the very least, like, trading damage when attacking. So, yeah, she's just basically worse than Chloe at off-tanking. But she has okay magic growth, like, acceptable, and she's really good speed, so she's basically about as good as these. Jade on Corrin. So, getting Jade more res is definitely really relevant. But she's not going to be using a longbow. She'd probably be like Tomahawk Corrining. I'll put her in like low B tier because she has decent res. This helps her tank magic, gives her more health for tanking. The magic damage is largely irrelevant to her. So you'd mostly be benefiting from the extra health and the res. And she could go for like Tomahawking with like a hit engraving. And she would like debuff and freeze favorable matchups. Like let's say there's enemies that will attack her because her defense isn't too high. She could freeze a group of enemies and then sit next to them and then enemy phase them. Actually, that kind of makes, that actually makes a little more sense in these. So that's actually not, I don't think it would be the best use because there's better ways to tank. I think even Leaf would be better at tanking than this setup because he gives you more like defense oriented stats. But this would be okay, but it wouldn't be really good or overpowered. So Jean on Corrin. So Jean could pretty much run whatever you put him on. I'll put him in high B tier just because he has startup costs. Other than that, you could consider him A tier. He can pretty much run whatever class you want and he'll be good at it. So you could run him as a longbow or a mage and he could pop off. It would just take some extra time, more so than some of these other units. Lyndon on Corrin. He would be like here. His availability isn't the best, but he's basically about as good as these. He's much faster than both of them, but his availability is worse, so I'm putting him lower. Louis, similar to Jade's performance, you know, more health, more res, helps him out tanking. He could freeze things and then force them to fight him. That would be the main use case, I think. Mavier, his availability is terrible. Him as a Corrin unit, you could switch his class. He has pretty decent speed, but you'd have to like get him speed fixing passives. He could go for Thorons if you get him on tomes. And I think his magic stat is decent, so he could be like, I'll put him in high B tier just because his availability is terrible. Otherwise like A, maybe low S, depending on how well, because he's pretty durable too. He could actually be like S tier if you got him earlier, but you get him so late it barely matters. Marin on Corrin. Marin can run magical classes, but it takes a while. She can run Wolf Knight, but it needs other things. I think this actually isn't that good, honestly. It's probably like here, like high B tier. So her problem is if you want to get her on magical classes, it takes a while. It takes quite a few chapters. So by the time you could get her on like a Mage Knight or something like that, like you can get her on Levin Sword Wolf Knight, like Levin Sword +5 Wolf Knight, and then you can't get sword power until, you know, post chapter 19, but like sword power Wolf Knight works, so the magic damage does help there, but Corrin doesn't really help her tank that much better. Like, yes, you get more HP, but if she's going to be going into the fray, like the nice thing about Ivy is that she has high defense and res, so when she goes into the fray and freezes things, you know she can tank it. But on Wolf Knight, you usually want to be on like Ike or Erica for like gentility or resolve or half damage from Ike so that you can tank more things. So Corrin just gives you extra health, but in maddening, that can't be the biggest difference. Like, it's not always the biggest difference. So if you're like 10 or like, let's say you're like 14 defense and something hits you for like 50, and then another thing hits you for 50, you're better off having 30 defense than you are having 15 more health. So like if you can get to like, you know, higher levels of defense or whatever, or, you know, fix your defensive stats themselves, that reduces damage better than health. So health tanking is iffy on Wolf Knight. On other classes like Wyvern or something, it doesn't really complement it. On Mage Knight it does. So if you could get her on Mage Knight earlier, she would go up, but because you can't for a while, it's an availability issue. Pandreo and Corrin, definitely one of the best ones. I'll put him here. I'd say he's about as good as Ivy. You put him on Sage, you put him on Mage Knight, whatever you want him on. He's very fast. He barely needs speed fixed. He needs like speed +3 to double throughout the entire game, maybe speed +5. Throw him on Mage Knight with speed +3 to 5, and he's doubling everything. So you can run Thoron and then Levin Sword, or Bolg, whichever you prefer. If you run Thoron and Bolg, you could get Gentility Plus for Bravery for +5 damage. So he has a lot of options. He also can use Nova, I believe. I think that's A rank. I could be wrong. It might be S rank. If it's S rank, then I'm wrong. But if it's A rank, he can use Nova. He can definitely use Nova on Sage. That I know is a fact. But that's the tome that quads that can help him build Corrin back up once the engage is over. But he can Thoron poke. He's very accurate. He has really good bulk. He can also like accidentally avoid tank if enough things are near him. Like his speed plus his passive usually lends itself to high avoid at base without any avoid passives. So giving him more bulk, giving him more res, giving him more magic, all plays into his kits perfectly and makes him pretty cracked. Like he's pretty cracked without Corrin, but with Corrin, even more so. All right, Panette. Panette I'll put in low A tier. I feel like on Warrior, her dex gets good enough where if you hit fix a thing, she'll be able to be relevant on it. I'm not so sure about her speed though, but you could go for like killer bow stuff on her, like a Wrath. You could be, so the build would be like Wrath, Killer Axe, Killer Bow, Holdout +++. So Wrath and Holdout +++ are your passives, and then you go for like freezes, and then you can like freeze enemy 2 ranges, equip the Killer Bow, have them attack you suicidally, even if you're at full health, and you like counterattack them with crits or something like that, or even just opening and like even just freezing off of crit kills. I could see that being relevant. She could also like longbow poke with high damage because she has like the highest strength in the game as far as I know. Let's see what are her growths though. It's her speed growth. That does matter long term. Her speed isn't that good. Her speed growth is 25, so her speed isn't the best. So her doubling is questionable, but she can hit hard once. And you could run different builds on this, but she could basically go for like crit freezes. She gets +10 crit when she's missing even 1 health. So even if you want to play it safe and just be like -5 from your max to get the +10 crit with a +20 crit engraving like Lyn or something, you could go for like +30 crit Killer Bow, and you're looking at like, you know, 60 to 70 base crit, roughly speaking. And that's also an accuracy increase. So she could go for like crit freezing, she could go for like longbow poke freezing, and they would hit hard, and she doesn't need to care about doubling necessarily. So it could be good. It would need tested. Maybe it's high B tier or low B tier, but I think because Panette's such a strong unit, you could probably still get her one-shotting and freezing things. Risotto, he would not benefit from this very much. He's very slow. He's not very slow. He's like average speed, but he's not the best at combat. His strength is low, so he usually needs speed and damage fixed, and this does neither of that for him. And he also can't 3 range unless you switch him onto Warrior, which might actually help him. So maybe he's okay at it, but as far as I can tell, he wouldn't be the best Corrin user. He would be better than Etier though, because at least he's like free. You know, if you can just like second seal him into Warrior and that's it, and then he'll like do okay. Saphir, she's similar to Amber, like similar hit rates too. She need a hit fix longbow. She could put in work. Also doubles as a backup, but she has good strength. She has Panette's base strength on Warrior. Maybe she's like high C tier. I feel like she's not as good. I don't know. I've never found her to be very good. Sidol, he's a dancer. Don't do it. All right, Tamara. So the health helps. The magic doesn't matter. The res kind of helps. I don't think this is a good idea for her. I think she wants something else if you want to get high performance out of her. I would put her... She's still very tanky. Like, she's still exceptionally tanky. I would say she's at least as good as Gold Mary. She's definitely not the best user of Corrin, but because she's so tanky, and she could, like, I'm doing a ringless, no Somniel run, which means no engraves, no passives, no foraging, none of that, no DLC, with literally no passives and base weapons, and just like as a level 7 Picket, she was like tanking like 3 to 4 enemies per enemy phase on chapter 19 at level 8 Picket. So like she's very tanky. So if anyone denies her tankiness, they just don't understand math. But just being tanky, she could freeze and then just tank an enemy phase, maybe go for sandstorms. With speed +5, and lance power 5, she could tank like 3 to 4 enemies after freezing them and kill them easily on Javelin, which is how I use her anyways. So she could just hold, that might be A tier, because she's fat. All right, so she's faster than Gold Mary, and tankier than Gold Mary. So she can hold a bunch of hold down a bunch of enemies, not get doubled, have high defense, have average res, which high speed with average res means mages don't double you ever. So you take very low damage from everything. And she can just like freeze a group of like 4, tank it all, and just javelin them all, assuming she doesn't get broken. So that could be very valuable. She also could use defense and res +3 Corrin passive to boost her tankiness even further, so that as enemies enter and fight her, she's even tankier. Now they'll get defense and res +3 at 1 range because it creates a 3x3 where you're in the middle grid of that, and it boosts whatever's on there. But Sandstorm would hit through that for the most part, so basically she could just make herself tanky. Actually, this might be a good build. This backup build, and it's true all the backups would do this, but she is very tanky. So she would leverage her tanking similar to like a thief build, where they leverage the avoid. So this actually could be like high A tier. Now it wouldn't be, actually no, it would be supportive because you'd be freezing groups of enemies similar to the Ivy. Maybe this is like high A tier actually, now that I think about it, because defense and res +3. So here are some build ideas for this. You could make like a super tank. So speed +5, that gets her doubling most things. And then if you need to speed tonic her to get her to like 33, 34 speed, whatever. But at speed +5, she's quite fast. And from there, you could get gentility or resolve. Gentility is -5 damage, and then plus the +3 defense and res, you're looking at -8 damage. With resolve, as you lose health, you get +7 defense and res, so you'd be +10 defense and res when you use the tiles. And you can also set it up so that enemies attack you at 2 range, and you javelin them, so that way they don't enter the defense and res tiles to increase their own defense and res. So there's definitely some interesting things you could do with this, but like freezing groups of enemies. The other thing too is if you freeze them, you're not going to be using that tile effect, but you could basically play it by ear. Like, okay, I freeze these enemies, tank them, enemy phase them with javelin. Even if she just sets up kills on them, and like maybe Sandstorm's like 1 or 2 out of 4 of them, that's like, you know, free kills off of just like attacking something. So that's not bad. And it's also a backup, so I think it actually would be quite good because it plays into her strengths of being a tank. So and a backup specifically. Vander on this, I'll put him in low D tier. He just has he's really great in the early game. He's good for like 7 chapters, and then his stats fall off because he has bad bases and bad growths, and he's slow to level up because he's like level 15, so it takes him until like Solm until he starts leveling up again. But basically he just gets lapped by other units statistically, and that's essentially what his curse is. Veil, I think she would be, I'll put her in A tier because she's a dragon type, but her availability is terrible. But outside of that, if she was available like mid game, she'd be high, probably like better than Alir. Yunaka and Zelkov, honestly these are pretty good. I'm not going to put them in S tier because mages just one-shot them through their avoid tile, but they can avoid tank and stall out things, and it's pretty powerful, so it at least deserves high A tier. I think that's it. There's these other units. Gregory, he's similar to Citrine, high magic, kind of low dex with hit fixing. He could hit hard, maybe go for like a cancer momentum build. With Madeline, she's similar to the tanks. With Nell, she's similar to physical fast units like Marin, so I'll put her in B tier. I mean, it is true she's a dragon type and she can have perfect availability. So, all right, I'll put her in S tier. All right, we'll put the dragon types that you can get immediately or like very quickly in S tier because the dragon type utility is pretty good. Let's see, Zephia, she's very similar to Ivy, so I'll put her here. I think that's everyone. Let me just look through. Yes, that's everyone. So here are your S tiers. Basically what I'm looking for are units that either leverage all of the veins and can also leverage the other aspects of the kit in some way. Units that can leverage every aspect of the kit as well as some useful veins. Now obviously Sage Hortensia and Sage Pandreo Fire Vein is better than Lindworm Ivy's Sucker Vein, but the idea with the Ivy is that you don't use the veins and you have her aggressively approach groups, freeze one group, tank the other group, get healed, and keep doing that until she just kills like small groups And this is the same as delaying groups with fire, because instead of letting them clump up, get into super balls of like groups of 10 and 20 from all the enemies funneling into like a choke point of fire, you go out and aggressively attack them. So instead of being more enemy phase, tanking, delaying oriented, you're more player phase, aggressive oriented, while also enemy phasing. So it's throwing out the vein for killing, and that's what she would do as well. They would both do this. They're both on wyverns, and they're both relatively bulky with good magic and speed, like average speed that can be speed fixed so that they can kill, and they leverage the magic damage and the health that Corrin provides. Some of these, like these, you know, avoid tanks, the avoid tank thing. Then you have dragon type that has bad availability. You have enemy phase units that can tank literally with nothing, and I've proven it on chapter 19. She was like level 7 picket or something, and she's tanking everything. Like she's tanking like 3 to 4 dangerous enemies that one round my other units, like it's nothing. So she's very tanky. She's like unironically one of the best tanks in the game statistically, because she's fast, has really high defense, and really good like average res. And then these two are really good utility, or these three are actually these four are really good utilities for different reasons. These are damage oriented. This would be better than her, maybe. Well, maybe not. Her passive is actually really useful. Turning vulneraries into 22 HP heals is very nice, because vulns are cheap. You can buy a bunch of them. You just have to be within 2 range. Her passive's interesting, but she usually isn't missing health to use it because she gets one shot. So if she had more bulk, she would be better than her, because she could AoE heal when she's missing like 10 or 15 health or whatever. So that's pretty cool. His passives, whatever, if I recall correctly. These physical damage units, sometimes he could leverage magical, lower tier magical units that are still fast. In terms of like getting them online, and as obviously a top tier magical unit when she's invested in, whereas these are just like good magical units that are still like A tier. Physical damage, the rest of these just like a mixed bag that don't really pop off for unique reasons. And then the D tiers, Sadal using Corrin doesn't make sense. He should be dancing every turn, so him using Corrin stuff is just him wasting his turn. He could be dancing like an Ivy that has Corrin, who can kill and freeze 2 groups of things, which is way better than him doing it, because he can't deal damage on Dancer. So, and then Etier, just high investment cost to get her online, where Amber and Panette are just for free. Like, they're basically the exact same thing she is, with more bulk and more strength. So they fulfill her niche better than she does, which is unfortunate. They could have given her like 60% strength growth so she passes people, but instead it's just 40, and everyone else is, you know, these have like 40, so it's nothing unique. I think he has 45 as well. I think both of these have 45% strength growth. All right, so that's the Corrin thing. Definitely let me know if you agree, disagree, and why, and I'll see you next one. Peace.